So welcome to the Fastlane webinar. Again, title is Google Cloud Identity and Access Management, the first step in securing your account. I'm today your speaker. That's me, Maurice Kavalak, and I will guide you through the Google Cloud Identity first steps. This webinar is featured with Fastlane. Fastlane is a Google Cloud partner, and I would like to start off with a short introduction, just what Fastlane is, what Fastlane does. So Fastlane is an experienced, actually award-winning training provider, range of training methods itself, and focuses actually on flex or e-learning or classroom trainings even, and is particularly specialized in the area of cloud, cybersecurity, digital transformation, and mobility. From the experience I made so far with Fastlane, I would of course highly recommend Fastlane as a specialist for all the technology and business trainings, and even consulting services in this case. In case you would like actually to learn more about Fastlane, just go ahead and visit the website flane.de/en, in this case if you would like to have it in English. Cool. So let's kick it off. Cloud Identity as a Google Cloud Platform webinar. I'm your trainer. As said, my name is Maurice. I'm a certified Google Cloud architect and then authorized Google Cloud trainer. I'm based in Vienna, Austria, in good old Europe, and I do these trainings in English as well as in German. Please feel free to add me on LinkedIn if you have any other further questions or would like to get in touch in the future, of course. I do like to put the picture to my name, as you may get a face to a name as well then. Cool. So we will start off with foundational elements, or something you should actually know when you start with the Google Cloud and the Google Cloud platform in this case. So often what we observe with customers or with other clients is that, be it a startup, be it a huge enterprise, they often start somewhere else as where they actually should start. So they start with implementing already an idea by using different services, provisioning machines, or putting code on GCP actually. But you should actually focus in the first hand or in the first place at the foundational elements itself. And these foundational elements actually cover 5 topics: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, starting with cloud identity, cloud IAM, so identity and access management, then the whole networking, monitoring, and billing itself. In today's session, we will focus on the first two, so cloud identity and cloud IAM. Cloud identity covering, as it is on the slide itself, covers cloud Google accounts, domains, users, directory sync. If you have a huge enterprise, actually you don't want to do all the tasks or actions manually anymore. You would like to have something automated, of course. Then the whole topic around conflicting accounts, we will cover all of these later on. What is a conflicting account? How do I resolve conflicting accounts? And then authentication options and SSO configuration options actually. Point number 2 is then cloud identity and access management, which covers again identities, service accounts, a specific type of identities actually which exist in the Google Cloud world, roles and scopes, resource manager, hierarchy, and projects. So you should actually, at the end of this webinar, you should know what is a project, how can I structure my whole Google Cloud organization, how can I grant certain permissions, and how can I secure it as well in the end, of course. At the very end of the session, of course, I would like to then point to the additional trainings and webinars we have planned. So there will be a Google Kubernetes Engine webinar on the same time, delivered by my colleague Harald Haas. And next week we do have Google Cloud Security. Cool. Cloud identity. Now, in the world of Google itself, we do differentiate between two types of accounts. So you do have on the left-hand side, it says unmanaged users. Right-hand side, it says organization managed users. On the left hand, unmanaged users, you could even say or call them consumer accounts. So these are all users which basically got created before a domain was registered with Google Cloud. This means actually that, for example, I do like to take Microsoft always and Bill Gates, as almost everybody can relate to Bill Gates, and he most likely will watch YouTube as well. And in some point, he registered for Google services like YouTube or even Drive, and he took his corporate email address, bill.gates, I'm not sure if it's the right one he has, at microsoft.com. Could be an unmanaged user because he has access to that email address, or he could even generate his very own consumer account or unmanaged user with a gmail.com domain. It says here Google permits the use of any email address that can be verified, so you can use your corporate email address as well. But Google does not recommend to use unmanaged accounts or unmanaged users or consumer accounts with in a professional environment in GCP. The recommendation here would be actually to shift to the right-hand side to get to a point where you have organization managed users which perform certain actions and which can be controlled by somebody in an IT department, an IT manager, for example. These users are actually granted certain permissions, have certain authentication options, all managed by an organization. And organization managed users, as I said previously, are highly recommended for accessing a professional area or a professional business in GCP, as they grant, as it says here, additional control, audit, and security measures. So you can log certain things as well. Google itself actually leverages a single underlying identity system for granting access users to any Google service, actually with customer data and where customers store data. So the identity system is the very same you would actually use for search maps and so on. But you would have it managed. So gmail.com, for example, nobody manages. Actually, you are the of your very own email address. So nobody has any control of what you're gonna set, any configuration settings you make. But in a organization managed domain or world, you would actually have somebody controlling it. Now, when it comes to cloud identity itself, there are two models. The cloud identity free model, which is free of charge completely. You have the cloud identity premium, where you have certain capabilities, of course, which you don't have in the free environment or in the free licensing model. There are some MDM, so mobile device management functionalities. You do have certain security logging capabilities, which is not to a full degree implemented in the free version. But the cloud entity itself, or the system, is a scalable and secured IDaaS, so Identity as a Service solution for GCP user identities. It is the very same identity service that powers any G Suite and any G Suite service. So G Suite, in the matter of as a consumer account, you may be using Google Drive or you're using Google Docs, and you're not paying for it, right? But in the world, in a professional business, you would actually need to pay for that because somebody is again managing it from a organization, and you have to pay licensing fees per user in this case. For G Suite, you may look it up on the website itself. There are free models. There is the basic business and enterprise model. They vary in different options, basically depending on storage and again some MDM functionality again as logging capabilities for security measures. With cloud identity, you can actually integrate it with a third-party application. So you can use your very own SAML provider or identity provider. So you can actually say, I don't want to have the regular login screen. you can redirect any login attempt to your user domains to an SSO site, which then gets back redirected to a Google service you actually requested for. The identity provider, be it, for example, Okta, ADFS, or Azure Active Directory as well. Good. Cloud Identity, in this case, as well as the identity provider, provides certain capabilities, like you do have the possibility to set up factor authentication in this case. And as well, it provides certain auditing capabilities via user management, reporting, group audits, login attempts, and so on. So you do have a login activity report, for example. Good. When you get started actually with Cloud Identity, you can go through this decision tree and check at which stage you are. So in case you're already using a G Suite admin console, so this means you are paying for your domain, be it Microsoft.com, for example, you can actually go ahead and use it in case, we will see it afterwards, you do have certain policy requirements. If you don't have G Suite set up yet, you have to set up a cloud identity for your primary domain in the Google Cloud Console. As said, free of charge for the cloud identity free model. Now, that's the decision path in case you have already a G Suite domain set up. Then you would actually check if you have certain policies which require the prevention of super admin access to data in GCP, means you have super administrators in your environment which should not have the possibility to check data in GCP projects. If you do have this requirement of separation of these users, then you would actually need to set up a second, depending on how much you want, cloud identities with a different domain, so that only people who should have access to data in GCP are managed in the other domain, in the other cloud identity domain. If you don't have that policy requirement, you can just go ahead and continue using G Suite and the G Suite admin console for your cloud identity in this case. Now, when it comes to managing accounts in GCP, you have to differentiate between two different consoles. So there is the Cloud Console, which is for provisioning GCP resources, access and identity management, for roles in the GCP, for roles in and GCP resources, and configuring networking and on-premise integration, for example. So we will see in one of the next slides actually how they look like, but the Cloud Console itself is really different to the admin console. In the admin console, you would go ahead and create and manage user accounts. You would manage groups and the authentication options, for example, for admins. Very important, there is no overlapping functionality in these two consoles. So creating and managing users you can't do in the Cloud Console, nor you can't, and vice versa, you can't create GCP resources in the admin console, for example. In the admin console, you do have one more thing. You do have the possibility, or again, types of accounts. We said, okay, you do have consumer accounts and you do have organization managed accounts, but there could be the case that Bill Gates, in this case, for example, created an account for Google services like YouTube Drive before Microsoft registered the domain for cloud identity. Now you would actually like to move Bill Gates under the umbrella of Microsoft.com because you would like to have all your users managed somehow. There is something called a transfer tool for unmanaged users. We will talk about that in a few slides actually, but that's there in order to move existing users under the umbrella without losing data. Now I said two consoles. On the left-hand side, depending on what you have done so far with Google Cloud, you do have the Cloud Console, which might be familiar to you. where you provision resources, so like virtual machines, data sets for data scientists, serverless cloud functions where you just deploy really code which executes then. And on the right hand side you do have the admin console. The admin console now in this case is just for provisioning users, groups, managing them, activating or deactivating certain apps or services. Users in groups. So as said, there are you do that in the admin console. The admin console can be found, or it can be you can actually find it by going to your web browser, typing in admin.google.com, and you will be redirected to the admin console. In there, you manage user accounts in groups as said, and groups can be managed on a second endpoint as well, which is groups.google.com, which is a legacy endpoint actually. So it looks a little bit old-fashioned maybe, but you do have the very same capability on the or inside the admin console as well. Now, when it comes to groups, and especially when you look at the IAM part, then in the GCP console, you would like to have exactly this functionality, because nesting groups is a very important and very, let's say, convenient functionality, which eases the use of granting permissions. Because let's assume you do have a software developer group, which is then split to two continents. So you can say North America and Europe. And these are two teams. Now, if you grant certain permissions to the whole software engineering group, this cascades down to both teams. So you don't have to select both teams and grant them certain permissions. You can do it on the higher level or upper level group, which the other two groups are nested in. Groups, that's very interesting, but how do I get users now? What about user provisioning? What capabilities or what possibilities do I have to provision these? Now, Google offers 5 different ways of provisioning them. And go ahead by the very first approach, which is a manual provisioning. So you do go ahead and open the admin console, type in the first name, last name, email address, and you provision each user separately. The effort, of course, for this one is very high, but it is the lowest barrier to entry. This actually is or fits the very first phase of when you get started with the Google Cloud, so that you explore certain functionalities with just a few users, because it is actually the highest ongoing effort required, because whenever you need to add a new user or more than one user, you would need manually. So it's absolutely not scalable. The second option would be a CSV upload, which is then again done by a Google administrator in your organization. And the effort here, it says medium. Yes, it's not that high, because you can just copy paste more or less inside a CSV, a first name, last name, and email address, and then just provide the CSV to bulk upload all users. It is very useful when you want onboarded with the first group, let's say, or two. It's more flexible, of course, than the manual, but still not very scalable. Now, the third option in this case, Google Cloud Directory Sync, allows you to have an automated job which does the user provisioning for you. So you would actually go ahead and install a small application, the GCDS application, on a Windows Server machine, for example, which has access to your Active Directory. And then this application would be configured by your LDAP admin or your AD admin in order to select the right people and the right groups which should be synced up to Google. You have 2 requirements when it comes to GCDS, and so that's the abbreviation for Google Cloud Directory Sync. The server where you install the application needs to have access to your AD/LDAP, so it could be that you need to install it directly on the machine where Active Directory is running, so on your Active Directory controller, or not or, and the machine itself needs to have HTTPS access to the internet, so you could be able to talk to the Google APIs in this case. It requires no programming itself, just configuration work. And this is actually the scalable approach of doing that. The fourth option being the admin SDK/directory API. So I have said about Google Cloud Directory Sync, it basically uses just the admin SDK and the directory API in order to provision these users. So it's not using something you wouldn't have access to. So you can go ahead and actually, if you have custom requirements which are not met by the GCDS application, you can go ahead and develop your very own solution in this case and use the directory API and use the admin SDK in order to implement user provisioning tailored to your needs. Very flexible, of course, but you would actually need some programming or software engineering knowledge. And again, in this case, it's absolutely scalable because you to run it fully automated. And then there are outside there third-party tools as well, which do the very same thing. So they have developed a application, certain companies, and these tools or these applications are just using the directory API again in order to provision users. Of course, in this case, that might incur additional costs as, yeah, the company wants to see some money for it. As said previously, the Google Cloud Directory Sync is just a one-way sync, so it doesn't replicate any change you have made inside the cloud identity domain down to your LDAP directory or your AD on-premise, for example. So it just uploads configuration you have in your local AD. It is a delta sync, meaning okay, only changes will be synced up. It can be run scheduled or manual, depending on your configuration again. If you want to have it scheduled, you would actually need to provision a service on a Windows Server machine, for example. And it can be used again for on and offboarding. So when you would like to onboard a new employee, you can do that fully automated by just adding the employee to your local environment and offboarding the very same one. It uses, as said, public Google APIs, so there is nothing proprietary here. And it supports multiple authentication methods. Very important, terminating access when GCDS is used. Now, in the matter of offboarding, it is very important where you do it. So if you suspend the user in the admin console, the access to Google services will be immediately revoked because that's the source of truth in this case. If you remove it if you revoke access in LDAP or in your Active Directory, you would actually need to wait for the next sync run because it needs to sync up all the users or sync up all the changes of the delta up to Google. And make sure, for example, it says here, make sure that automated provisioning systems don't unsuspend the user. So you have suspended the user in the admin console, for example, but the next sync job unsuspends the user again because you haven't done the change in your local environment. So it would actually overwrite your changes because, as said, we don't, or the GCDS tool doesn't sync it down to your local environment. Okay. I have said conflicting accounts, very important topic, because let's take again Bill Gates here. Bill Gates has used Google Drive, Google Docs before Microsoft decided to have a cloud identity because they want to have all your Microsoft.com users managed. What are conflicting accounts? Basically, that's the scenario I just described. The consumer already using Google services with the corporate email address. And now Microsoft wants to take this user under the umbrella of Microsoft.com. What to do in this case? There is a tool called the transfer tool for unmanaged users. It's inside of the admin console. So you can go ahead once you have verified your domain. Verifying domain works either per CNAME, text record, or I think even Google Analytics works now, where you say, okay, I'm the owner of the domain and I want to have it managed. And once you have done that, 24 hours usually it takes, and then you get all the users which are conflicting accounts basically. So they have registered their business email address with Google already. Now you can actually do nothing about it because you don't want to have it managed, or you can say, okay, these users should be managed, or just individual users should be managed, and I can send out transfer requests to these users. How does the transfer tool or transfer tool for unmanaged users look like? The screen on the left-hand side is just a small screenshot of the transfer tool itself. It basically lists just the users, not the services they use because of data privacy reasons. And best practices, actually, if you want to have them managed under the umbrella of your cloud identity domain, apply a change management process. Very important. Seen with a lot of customers that they actually get confused. So the end users get confused in case there was no communication done when they receive such a transfer request. So warn them in advance what is happening, that no data will be lost, that they are just going to be managed now, meaning, okay, there could be some policies now applied to the account itself. And another thing would be actually to ask them, are they using any G Suite services, which are now, as they are just consumers, free of charge. Now, when they get managed, they would actually need to have G Suite licenses attached to it if they want to continue using these services like Drive, like Google Docs, Sheets, and so on. Otherwise, they will not have access to these services once they get a cloud identity license, but no G Suite license. Now I said authentication options. So you can go ahead and select, okay, abilities basically. You can say, I want to have Google as my identity provider because Google should take care of storing all the credentials and authentication options. And I do have the possibility of setting or using two-factor authentication possibilities Google gives you. So be it an SMS, be it a Google Validator app or a Google push, I think it is called, where you would actually get a push notification via where it says, are you trying to log in right now? Just click on this button if you are, and no if you're not. Or you do have the second possibility saying, okay, I do have already another identity provider and I would like to use that, which gives you the possibility of SSO, so single sign-on. And the requirement would be here that it supports SAML 2.0 based authentication. Now it says here on the right-hand side, down on the lower arrow, Google Authentication with two-step verification new. So 2 weeks ago, I think that was just introduced by Google that you can use the identity provider, so single sign-on solution with a Google two-factor authentication option. So basically you can go ahead and say, okay, I do have Okta, for example, as my identity provider, which gives me SSO, but I can go ahead and say I would still use a two-factor authentication supported by Google. In this case, for example, the Google Authenticator app on my phone. This was not possible until, I think, 2 weeks ago. So the key decisions what you should take away from the cloud identity part itself. So how will cloud identity be implemented? Do I want to have two domains separated or just one? Do I have policies which require separation? Who will be the cloud identity super administrator? Very important, as they do have a lot of privileges on deactivating services, activating services, and so on. What will be the primary domain for my identity? And I do have the possibility, of course, of adding alias domains to it. And I have the possibility of adding secondary domains. There is a small difference actually in the functionality and the licensing itself between alias domains and secondary domains. But the most important thing as well when it comes to the transfer tool, what will be my primary domain and what is my primary domain my users may have already registered for Google services. How will users and groups be provisioned? Should they be provisioned in a manual way, a CSV upload? Do I want to develop my very own sync job or sync application, or do I want to use GCDS, for example? I do like to stress on number 5. So what naming schema used for groups? We will see later on as well for folders, projects in the GCP world that a naming schema is a very important topic. So you should be actually able to read or to somehow get a connection with the name of a group already and the purpose of the group. So looking at the name, okay, that's my group for developers sitting in and so on. And number 6, which authentication method will be used? So do I have a third-party identity provider in use, or do I want to go all over? And secondary, I do have the possibility as well to enforce certain authentication rules so that everybody sitting within one group, for example, needs to have a second factor authentication activated. Cool. Are there any questions so far? Because we will now jump to part number 2, which will be resource hierarchy, resource organization, cloud IAM. Let me just check. Okay, nothing so far. So to the next part, resource organization in the GCP world. How is everything structured? That's the question you should be able to answer once we have gone through all these together. So in the GCP world, everything starts with an organization node, which is on the most top level you can actually think of. Beneath the organization node, you have folders which let you and structure your organization, which you have in your company established already. So you could have departments which you would like actually to have replicated in the GCP world. You can have below that teams and below that projects. It could be, for example, a structure you can establish there. Every level in this case, every level provides a trust boundary and a resource isolation. So on each folder, for example, or even on an organization node as well as on a project, you can apply IAM roles, which means trust boundaries. You can actually say, okay, everything below that point, and especially from a project perspective, you can say, okay, only on that level, users within this group should be able to do that. And the lowest level are the resources, or on the lowest level are the resources. Resources in this case would be, for example, virtual machines, storage, data sets, for example, for BigQuery, if you have heard of the service, and so on. A very important aspect when it comes to the cloud resource hierarchy itself, Google with the hierarchy itself has a top-down access inheritance policy, which means whatever you do on a top level, you cannot revoke that on a lower level anymore. You can just add on top of that, which means if you say, okay, group ABC, group developers can create projects on the organization itself, you cannot revoke that access anymore on lower levels, which means you should follow a least privilege approach. So you should actually apply something which is, for example, just organization viewer on the top level, which means they can look at the organization but nothing more. Then granularly go down and grant permissions to groups you would actually like to perform certain actions. Now answering the question, what is an organization? An organization is basically the supernode of projects or any resource you would have inside of the GCP world. Itself, the organization allows the following controls, as it says here, which then gets inherited down to everything you have provisioned. You can define IAM policies on the organization itself. As I said previously, for example, that a group is always a project creator. This means everything below an organization is as well. This group is a project creator on each resource. You can determine the structure, the initial folder structure of the resource hierarchy, and you can delegate as well responsibilities for critical components. So you can say, okay, this group is my network administrating group. This is a billing user, for example, or billing administrator, and so on. And how does a organization map to a cloud identity? It's one-to-one. An organization is basically a cloud identity directory, the single one. See that afterwards I will go into both consoles actually and create users, create groups, for example, and grant certain roles to certain groups or users. What is a folder? Basically, a folder is a helping resource which allows you to granularly structure your whole hierarchy in the GCP world. So a folder itself can contain, of course, projects, but folders can as well contain other folders up to 4 levels deep. Or it basically can combine as well, or it can combine both of these. So you can have folders, but you can have as well projects in there. When looking at folders, what do they allow, or what are they used for? You can again enforce here certain IAM policies, which means control access abilities. And you can enforce certain constraints through the organization policy service, which is a very specific policy which you set usually just once, but yeah, you can do it either on a folder, you can do it, of course, on an organization level as well. Now, what is a project? We said, okay, on the top level, we have organizations. Below that, you can have folders, but you don't have to. You can, of course, attach just projects to organizations. But what is a project? A project is basically the lowest part of a containering or of a resource container, here it says, where you would actually really provision Google Cloud services or Google Cloud Platform services like a virtual machine, like a storage object or a storage unit, where you would architect your whole network structure, where you would deploy code, for example, or build code. And all these resources are always part of a project, and a project always belongs to an organization, either through folders, but it always has on the top level an organization. And each project is completely separate from one another. So whatever you do in one project stays in that one project. There are certain constructs when it comes to networking, but this is a very different topic here right now. As said, all GCP resources you use are associated with the project. On projects, you actually enable billing. So enable billing means you attach a billing account to a project, and the billing account is a contract actually between you and Google how services will be built. And on the project level or on the project itself, you enable certain services and APIs. So you can say, okay, I would like to have Compute Engine, Kubernetes Engine, or anything else enabled, and APIs as well. Projects, very important, have 3 identifying attributes. So you do have a project ID, project name, and project number. The project ID and the project number are actually globally unique, but not the project name. And the project name can be changed afterwards as well, so it's mutable. The first two are chosen by you. The third one, so the project number, is assigned by GCP. And very important, we said for groups, you should have a naming schema. You should have a naming schema as well for projects in this case. So when you look at projects or the project IDs, project names, you should already know when you take a look just at the name of it, what is the purpose of this project? Is it a, for example, production project where you have production instances running? Is it QA, test, development, and so on? Now to the very, I would say, most important part right now, that is identity and access management. It all combines, or it all consists of three parts: an identity, an IAM role, and the resource itself. Identities on the top level could be either user accounts, could be groups or a group, or it could be a service account. Now the question would be, what is a service account? A service account is something which lives just in the GCP world, so it's not cannot be found in the admin console. A service account is an identity for a machine, basically, or a service, a Google service in this case. So you can say, okay, I attach a service account to a virtual machine, which is then basically granted a certain, which has a certain role, which grants certain permissions to other services and resources. We said, or I said previously, nesting groups is a very important topic because you would actually like to grant or to assign roles to groups rather than just user accounts, because if you do it on a user account level, you have a hard job actually maintaining these, because a group, you can actually attach a role to a group and this cascades down then to user accounts. Now let's say you want to onboard a new employee, a new software engineer, for example. You just add it to the group and he or she gets all roles assigned automatically without anything doing in addition. Same one goes for offboarding this employee. You just remove him or her from the group and all access permissions are revoked immediately. Roles can be, in the next slide we will see it, roles, there are three types basically. You can have primitives, predefined, or custom roles, and these roles say, okay, what can you do on certain resources? Identity and access management is all about asking or answering these questions. Who can do what on which resource? Very important. Remember always this sentence. Identity and access management, the question who can be an identity, a Google Cloud or Cloud Identity user, a service account as said, can be a Google group or Cloud Identity or G Suite domain itself. Using groups to manage IAM roles, I said you should actually go ahead and use groups instead of individuals, so identities or individual identities, user identities, in order to grant or to assign roles. A group can be used for each project, here it says, or a group can be used for each team of users. So it's up to you to decide actually what do you want to establish within your organization. Google itself recommends to create groups for each team you have, so that in order that you have temporary users, for example, just with users which just work on a project, so contractors, for example, and once the project is finished, you just revoke access by removing the contractor from the group. For easy automation, it says here use a logical naming schema again. Naming schema is very important because you should actually know just by looking at the name itself the purpose of it. Very important, of course, crucial as well to identify who has permissions to manage groups. And as said, and a few times already, adding a user to a group will grant that user the group roles and all the access permissions. Now, user identities are often managed through the on-prem LDAP or LDAP. So you can fully automate all this flow by having GCDS or having your very own developed application, which basically syncs it up, assigns the user to the group. The group has certain roles attached to it. So you can actually onboard new employees or offboard new employees quite fast and fully automated. Now IAM roles. So we said who can do what on which resource. Now the roles itself answer, or you do have three types. As said previously, primitives, you have predefined roles or custom roles. Primitives and predefined roles are the most used ones. If you have really specific use cases which are not covered by primitives and predefines, you can go ahead and customize your roles to your needs. What are roles itself? Roles are just a collection of permissions that may be assigned to user groups or service accounts. And what are permissions? Permissions basically grant the ability to execute specific API calls. So you can say, okay, here it says compute instances create. So basically when you say, okay, my developer group has the permission to compute or to create instances of type compute, they can actually create virtual machines in the end. Now, primitive roles. What are primitive roles? Primitive roles are legacy GCP roles that grant a broader set of permissions. So it's not granularly tailored down to just a certain job. Here it says then job functions for predefined roles, but you can actually not say he is the owner of virtual machines only. He's the owner of the whole, which means he's the owner of all services in this project. Predefined roles. Predefined roles are more granular than primitive roles, and they're job functions. So you can say, okay, that's my compute administrator, and he can go ahead and manage every virtual machine in this project, but he cannot do anything more than virtual machines. So he cannot go ahead and create data sets, for example. And the third possibility and the third option are custom roles. So the custom roles basically gives you the freedom of doing or creating roles based on your need. We'll see what options you have, because you can actually cluster them with primitive roles, predefined roles, and just revoking certain permissions within the predefined role. Quite mighty. Primitive roles, as said, basically they say, okay, you can do something, but on all resources, as said. So you are a project owner, you can do anything, or you can manage any service within this project. So there are three types: the owner, editor, viewer, and there is a specific primitive role called the billing administrator, which or this specific role is actually just there for managing all billing activities. The project owner itself can invite members, remove members, delete projects, and so on. And you can have multiple of these. So it's not limited to one project owner per project. You can have multiple owners, multiple editors, multiple viewers. Same with billing administrators, actually. When we come to predefined roles, they actually answer the question, who can do what on a specific resource. So for example, on compute engine within this specific project or folder or organization. And then we have already the custom roles. So I said you can actually, if you have a very specific requirement, you can say, I want to create a custom role. And this custom role consists of a predefined role and a second predefined role and a permission, or it consists of just permissions, or it consists just of predefined roles. And very specific, that's the fourth bubble here. It can consist of one role where you remove just one specific permission because you don't want to have it there. You want, for example, to have a compute administrator, but you want to remove the compute instance creator because he should not be, or this role, or everybody attached or who has the role of this specific role should not be able to create virtual machines. And custom roles may be defined at an organization level so that you can actually use this custom role for further activities on every lower level. Cool. I have talked about service accounts already. Service accounts are basically, again, identity. They are used for machine-to-machine communication. So you would actually say, okay, a service account which has role instance administrator, for example, or BigQuery administrator, and if a machine uses this service account to authenticate to a service, it will check the role, it will check the permissions and say, okay, you are allowed to use that resource or you're allowed to access this resource or not. And then we have as well the possibility saying, okay, service accounts are not just identities, service accounts are also resources, so that a human identity, so a cloud identity, user can actually, for example, use and access a specific service account. So it can, but with just this specific role, so the service account actor role would be needed in order to achieve all that. Google doesn't really recommend to do that because a logging or within the logging itself, you don't actually see who has done what in case you allow that. Because let's assume I'm doing or I'm in this scenario and I'm provisioning a new machine. The logging itself would say service account ABC has logged the machine, even though in the backend it was me. Okay, cool. So from a theoretical point of view, that would be it. I do have prepared that we go through the consoles a little bit so that you can actually see how it works. But first hand, I would like to ask if there are any questions so far. Nothing so far. Please feel free to add any at any point in time when you see some need or if there is something unclear actually. But for now, I will then continue with the consoles. Cool. So first hand, that's the Google Cloud Console, which you might have already seen because you might have already registered an account with Google Cloud. But there is a second one, which you would actually see when you go to admin.google.com. We'll use my, and we have, or I have registered as my primary domain demo.cloudpilots.com as I work for the Cloud Pilots. And here I am a super administrator now. That's the view of a super administrator where you go ahead and provision users now. Users, groups, organizational units, and every setting you can actually make for your domain. Now users, very easy. If you want to create new ones, you click on the users, you say, I would like to add a new user and I would like to add let's say Fastlane. Last name is free, cool name. And that's my email address for it. I would like to have a password automatically generated for him or for her and say add new user. Very quick. That's the Fastlane user of 3. That's a password I don't want to show right now. And I can email that logging info to somebody, or I can even and hand it over to the guy. I can as well add it to existing groups immediately from here, which I don't want to do right now. But Fastlane 3 is the user which I created just right now. You can go ahead and say bulk upload. That's the other option we have seen. So attach CSV, you would actually just bulk upload whatever you have provided in the CSV file. You can as well download here a blank CSV template in order to basically have a template where you can start off or where you know the structure, how to upload it correctly. You can, of course, go ahead and download users. Cool. That's about users. If you go in here and say Fastlane and search for the Fastlane user, come on. I've created already a few. The last one I created is Fastlane 3. I can go in here and say, okay, I do have possibilities to check out how much of mail storage is he or she using, how much of drive storage, how many docs does he or she own. I can activate and enforce even verification. I can apply recovery information and so on. I can attach the user to a group. I can attach roles to it. So I want, for example, that Fastlane 3 is a super administrator like I am, but I can as well attach here licenses to the user. It has, for example, G Suite Enterprise and Android management already. That's about users. Now, when we go back, it's all web-based, by the way, so you don't have to install any application. Google is all in about web, of course. So when there is a new functionality, there is no real update you need to download or something. It's just provided to you. Groups. When we go in groups and we can say, okay, I want to have a new group. I can say, okay, Fastlane 6 because it started at 6 p.m. my time here. That's the name of it. Fastlane group dated 6 p.m. and the group address should be Fastlane 6. The group owner, I need to supply one. It's going to be me. Next, and then I can select the access type or the visibility of the group itself. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 predefined ones, which then basically if you select it up here, it changes down here the visibility for members, topics, posts, and owners. For example, restricted, but if it doesn't match my needs, I can go in and, I don't know, unselect, for example, quite a lot of options, and then custom will be selected automatically. For now, I will say restricted. This drop-down here allows me to select who can join the group. Only invited users can join the group, anyone in the organization can join, or anyone in the organization can actually ask to join the group. And somebody would actually need then to say, okay, you're allowed to join the group. This tick box here allow members outside your organization so that somebody within or not with your domain can join the group as well, which I don't want to do, of course. Only invited users should be able to join the group for my side. And I would say create group. Now, once I've created the group, I can say, cool, let's add new members. So it's just me because I'm the owner right now, but I would like to have Fastlane 3 here as well. So add to group. So if I would refresh the group right now, I would see Fastlane, or I do see Fastlane 3 here now. I can go ahead and rename or delete the group, of course, which I don't want to do right now. But let's go ahead with a few more options. Google gives you the possibility to create organizational units, or OUs, or groups. There are just a small difference in OUs and groups. Groups, of course, have an email address, and organizational units have just a name in this case. But auto licensing, for example, works only for organizational units. Small side note in this case. When we go into the apps section, I do have the possibility as a super administrator to say, okay, I don't want to allow certain groups or OUs, in this case, organizational units, or the whole organization to have the possibility to use, for example, calendar. I can say, okay, deactivate this. So turn off for everyone. That's very important if you go ahead and say, okay, my organization is using Office 365 with a hybrid scenario of there are certain groups which use Google Cloud Platform services, so GCP services, but not G Suite services. So you can turn off Calendar, you can turn off Gmail, for example, because they are using already Outlook and Calendar in the Office 365 environment. You can drill that down to organization units, but you can drill it down as well to groups. So you can say search group, and then you can activate or deactivate these services or apps for groups as well. These are now G Suite apps once it comes up. Again, exactly. So G Suite apps, but you do have additional Google services which are not covered by the G Suite SLA, which are then other services like analytics is somewhere here. Yeah, here. Analytics. So you can say a certain organizational unit here does not have access to a specific, or does not have access, or should not have access to Google Analytics in this case, or Google Cloud Platform. You can even say, okay, this group is not allowed even to log in or use Google Cloud Platform. That's about services. When we come to the part of billing, let's go back to the starting page. So billing, you would actually see here how many licenses you have. We are, as a Google partner, we have quite a lot of G Suite Enterprise licenses. So we do not have the need, as we said, if you're already using G Suite, you don't have the need actually to set up a separate cloud identity right now. If you're just cloud identity user or cloud identity domain user, you would actually see cloud identity here, be it free or premium. Domains, as said, when you start, actually, you would need to verify that you are the owner of a domain you would like to use. Google, in the very first step, when you set up or when you register for a cloud domain, guides you through the whole process. This is what I would show right now is just how you would do it manually if there is no guidance. We do have quite a few domains actually. Cool. There is a whole topic about administrating the Google Admin Console. Now let's come to the second console, which would be the Google Cloud Console, the real one where you say, okay, I would like to have machines provisioned where I do use services out of these huge offer here, compared to Azure, AWS in this case. Now we will look only at the IAM part here. And the IAM part is covered or covers identity and access management, who can do what on which resource, as said previously. Let's close that again. At the very top, you do have the burger menu, so-called the 3 lines, where you can go ahead and select services. And one more thing, you do have the resource selector at the very top, and there you have a search here as well. But the resource selector actually lets you select on which resource do you want to perform, for example, IAM right now. I want to have it on my organization node. I said, okay, an organization node maps one-to-one to a cloud identity domain. That's my cloud identity domain, demo.cloudpilots.com. So I will select it right now. What I'm going to do is I will say my user, the point I will pop there. So my user, maurice.kablak@demo.cloudpilots.com, should have the role of, let's say, billing. I'm a billing account administrator. So we said Google follows the top-down inheritance approach. So whatever you do on a top level, you cannot remove or revoke that role or permission on a lower level. So let's go ahead and select the lower level. Here you do have 2 tabs always. You do have the recent and you do have the all tab, which shows you the whole tree. And everything below demo.cloudpilots.com will be showed here. So let's go ahead and say, okay, in the trainer eval, that's a lower level than my organization node. Let's go back. Did I save? Yeah, I said billing account administrator is a specific role. Let's change it to something different. So let's say I'm a project owner. Save. I'm a project owner. Let's go back to trainer eval again. Here, trainer eval. So in here, I would show, or I would be displayed with my name as, again, the owner. And I have inherited that permission or that role from demo.cloudpilots.com. And I cannot revoke that anymore. So role cannot be edited as it is inherited from another resource. So this means I can just go ahead and say, okay, this user should have additional roles, so additional permissions, but I cannot say he or she should not have this specific role revoked or removed. So I'm an auto machine learning specialist. Let's take I'm an admin here. So there you go. I can go ahead and revoke that access, or I can revoke that role as I have granted it on this level. And as said previously, we can go ahead and say, okay, fast lane. I think it was 6, right? At demo.cloudpilots.com. So I can go ahead and say, okay, I want to have a group, which is a project owner. And everybody within this group is a project owner automatically as well. So whenever you onboard a new employee, you add it to the group, he or she gets automatically assigned the role the group has. Save. So Fastlane 6 is now a project owner. There is no inheritance. Now let's go one level down, say trainer evil on level 2, and you will see the exact same behavior now with the group as we have seen it previously with, come on, refresh. Exactly, you see it, Fastlane.6, Fastlane 6 at demo.cloudpilot.com has the role owner, is inherited from the folder above, trainer evil, and I cannot remove that role anymore. Now we have seen how that works. So you would actually say, or you would actually go ahead and say, this user should be just my network administrator or this group. Like we have a GCP admins group, which are owners always, which are organization administrators always, and which are folder administrators always. But how do I actually structure, how do I create this structure and this hierarchy? Now in the IAM part itself, if you are an organization administrator, you do have this specific line down here, which is quite often overseen. Sorry, just gonna drink a little bit. You do have the possibility to create all these levels. So I go ahead just and say create folder will be, let's call it level 65. And I will go ahead and say, okay, I can either structure it or I can place it under trainer evil. I can place it under level 2. I can place it under level 4, under level 3, but I cannot place it under level 4 because we said 4 levels are the maximum. Under level 4, you would actually get an error, which then says, okay, you can create only projects now. I'm going to create it under trainer evil. And from now on, you do have the folder level 65 sitting under trainer evil. And we can go ahead either on this view, which I don't really like, to grant certain roles, because you can actually do the very same as we did on the previous view. You can do it here as well. So you can say my user demo.cloudpilots.com should have a certain role, billing or BigQuery administrator, for example. And if we would go back, policy updated, correct. If we would go back to IAM in this case and select, go to all, level 65, you would actually see, okay, BigQuery administrator, and I got as well the roles of a folder administrator and a folder editor because I created this folder. But I can, of course, revoke that access or revoke that role from the user itself or a group if it's a group. Cool. And yeah, based on that, so based on whatever IAM policies you have applied here, the user have the possibility to go ahead and say, okay, compute engine, for example, I would like, okay, we need project first because you can only provision resources in projects, not in folders, right? So I would go ahead and say, okay, in here, we can sign up for a free trial. Of course, Google gives you the possibility to use $300 free credit, or you can use a already existing billing account. And based on that, based on the IAM policies you have applied in your IAM section here, the user can go ahead and do certain things. that would be it actually. I'm gonna jump back to my slides right now and would ask again if there are questions. I can see Christian already said no questions so far. Thank you. Is there an attendee who has a question? I will wait a few minutes and then I will sum it up in the end if there are no. Okay, nothing yet. Okay, cool. Well, if there are no questions, then I'm gonna sum it up right now and switch back to my presentation. First of all, of course, I would like to thank you for attention. Training recommendations. I hope to see you actually again within one of our next webinars, which would be on Thursday, same time in English, about Google Kubernetes Engine, so a managed Kubernetes offer in the Google Cloud Platform, which will be delivered by my awesome colleague Harold Haas. And next week, same time, same day, we do have a Google Cloud Security webinar. And of course, you do have other trainings which are delivered by Fastlane, which can be found on the website flane.de/en/google-cloud. Three of them are here mentioned: security in Google Cloud Platform, SGCP, the code for it, AGCP-I for architecting with Google Cloud infrastructure, or architecting with Google Cloud design and processes with the code AGCP-DP. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you in the next webinars, and I hope we have met your expectations. Yeah, at the end of when you quit basically the meeting, there will be a feedback option. I would be happy about feedback, be it good or bad. Thank you very much, and talk to you soon. Bye.